Everybody, welcome to the weekly astrology for the week of April 25th. So this week we got a lot of interesting things going on. And actually, other than the retrograde, the Mercury retrograde going on, there isn't, a lot else that's changed since, for the last couple weeks. But I thought I would take a deeper look at this Mercury retrograde, and also there's some things that are going on with Venus that I think are pretty important. There's like a lot of Venus energy going on, a lot of changes there, and I think that will continue throughout the summer, and I told you last week that we'd talk about it. The other thing is, this video is going to be super late, so I apologize for those of you that have been waiting, because a lot of you know that I usually release these every Sunday morning, and usually I'm on time, but this week, not gonna happen. So, anyway, let's take a look at the week. This week we have this Mercury retrograde that's going to be on the 28th. And it's going to be retrograding in Taurus. Very interesting. There's a heavy focus on money and financials, but also I think there's a heavy focus on relationships and friendships as well. I tell Taurus this all the time. I think if Taurus looks back over the past couple of years, maybe even few years, like 3 years, they've probably had people come into their lives and then leave as well, and maybe some of them will be coming back during this time. That's specific to Taurus, but having said that, I think on a global scale, a lot of us have maybe seen friends come and go recently, like over the past year. There might have been a changing of our friends and things like that. Also more changes in our money, thinking about how we can become more stable with our finances, and that's what Taurus wants us to do here with this Mercury retrograde in a lot of ways. I think that this retrograde also is going to be a lot stronger. We have, obviously 5 planets now are going to be retrograde during this time. So I think it's a good time also to take it easy on the people in our lives, and take it easy on the global scale as well if we're dealing with people in the world. What you have to realize is this is pretty crazy to have 5 planets retrograde. So people who don't understand this stuff, they could be losing it. They could be going, nuts. They could also be very polar, which we've talked about, this polarization over the past couple weeks. I mean, it's been a much longer process, but it's strengthening now. And but again, this is tough for people who don't understand all these things. So people might be freaking out, things might not be working, and all this other stuff. So, under this Mercury retrograde in Taurus here, because of everything else, I think that in a lot of ways it could be testing our patience and testing your patience, I should say, when it comes to people and dealing with people. I also like to say that it's probably a good time to look at your health as well. We have this Mars retrograde, which is really a good time to make sure that you're staying healthy in a lot of ways, make sure you're not going to get injured or anything like that. But I think with this Mercury retrograde here in Taurus, it's also a good time to definitely take a peek at your health. There's a lot of other astrological things going on that I think really are helping people focus on their health and trying to get healthier and things along those lines. So that might be something you might be looking at. But you could even be looking at how you make money and how you've been making money and how you can change that during this time with this retrograde. But again, I would say it's mostly about you maybe going back over finances and friendships and looking how to stabilize those things. So the first aspect we have here to Mercury during this retrograde, right at the beginning there, we have the moon trining Mercury. And, I think because Mercury is retrograde, I think with the moon trine Mercury, it's going to be looking at how we speak, how we share with people, and how we can even speak better, how we can learn how to speak to people better, how we can communicate with people. This is a great time for those of you that are in sales. If you're in sales or you deal with the public in general, moon trine Mercury like this with Mercury retrograde, so that's a very important distinction. This isn't like your typical moon trine Mercury. I think it's a little bit different when it's retrograde. I think, again, we're more focusing internal, more focusing on ourselves, more focusing on how we can make ourselves better. So again, if you're in sales or dealing with the public or anything like that, it's a good time to pick up new sales skills or new people skills or learning how to speak to people differently. You might be changing those things. And again, that might sound really mundane, but and it probably is, but it could help you in a lot of ways. It's also a great time to improve your mental strength. It's even a good time to look at how you have already improved your mental strength. We've all been through difficulties, I say, pretty much over the past 8 years. So it might be a good time for you to look at like all the difficulties that you've been through over the past 8 years and look at how you've strengthened. Maybe, there are things happened to you that you couldn't even handle back then. But now, if the same thing were to happen to you, maybe you realize that you'd be able to handle it even better than you ever could have before. So it's all about looking at mental strength and Moon Trine Mercury here, and increasing that mental strength. It's a good time to learn new language as well, and you could be literally learning a new language, or again, kind of back to that sales thing, you could be learning a new way of communicating in some way, or learning something different, or even learning different ways of doing things. So again, this could be outside of language. It could have to do with your job and things like that. You could be learning new ways of doing things that you've been doing for a while. I'd say this Moon Trine Mercury is really powerful. Also, learning new ways of doing things, that's like a major trend here with all these retrograde planets, right? Redoing everything basically. So learning new and better ways. I would say focused on that as well. I always say during retrogrades, I personally think it's a good time to educate yourself on things that you've been doing and finding better ways anyway. But with 5 planets retrograde, I think it's a really good time to kind of like sharpen your skills and get better at doing things. With this Moon Trine Mercury, you could also, it's kind of like considered a humorous transit, usually pretty funny, so you could find new humor in things. Could be learning how to become more compassionate as well. I see this, I've seen this already. Like a lot of people, I think under Mars retrograde, sometimes people get either really angry, they can get more angry, or they can become more compassionate. It's interesting because I've just noticed over the past few days, people seem to be a little bit more compassionate towards other people. It seems to be. So it's interesting. But it's also a really great time to, like I said, learn what strengths you already have and kind of improve upon those. Next, we have next we're going to have, Mercury is going to be trining Pluto as well. This is looking at risks and looking at how we take risks. During the card readings, pretty much for the past couple of weeks, there's been a heavy emphasis on risk taking and things like that, which normally, again, during a Mars retrograde, it's not necessarily a great time to take risks. The risks are 10 times riskier, and could have better chance of something bad happening. But still, I think there's a lot of other things that kind of go into these periods. So it might be a good period to look at taking a risk, or even build strength for a risk that you're going to take after these retrogrades. So end of June, really, as far as I'm concerned, the beginning of August is a much better time astrologically, for kind of moving forward. So again, Mercury trine Pluto, a lot of you might be preparing for a lot of this. Maybe you're preparing a risk. And if you're thinking about taking a risk, like if you're thinking about starting a business, you're thinking about, asking somebody out, you're thinking about doing whatever, you might want to just, again, build up a lot of strength so that when you do take up that risk, when things go direct, it ends up more in your favor. Mercury trine Pluto is also a great time for us to self-motivate. It's a great time for us to get more motivated and look at how we can motivate ourselves to do things a lot better. And it's also a good time to learn how to talk to yourself. Again, a lot of these retrograde things, I think we're talking to ourselves in a lot of ways, and learning how to deal with ourselves differently. This is also, Mercury trine Pluto is really great for dealing with the public as well, and learning how to cooperate better with people. So, like I said, even though we have this Mars stuff going on, we do have a lot of things where I think we're learning how to better deal with people. Mercury is also going to be trining the North Node here. And that I kind of just think strengthens the whole communicating with people, learning how to communicate with the public, learning how to communicate with, about social issues and things like that, and learning how to talk about them, and learning how to even be honest about them as well. There's been a lot of lying and things like that. I think that all these Pluto aspects, there's been a lot of deceit going on, and a lot of, issues around that. So, I think we could see a lot of truths coming out when we come out of these retrogrades, a lot of truths being exposed on kind of a global scale. We also have Mercury is going to be sextiling Chiron at this time. So, I think this is, again, talking to yourself, checking in with your own self, and healing old wounds. And, kind of healing wounds in regards to money, finances, friends, and relationships in a lot of ways. On April 29th, we have Venus entering Taurus. Great time for finances. I think it adds, a little emphasis on trying to increase your finances, looking at how you can increase your finances, getting things moving in a more slow and steady pace as well. I mean, that's Taurus is, slow and steady, but moving forward. So a lot of you could be looking at that, and again with friends as well, friends and social type events and social things, social gatherings. A lot of you could be kind of looking and emphasizing those areas with Venus entering Taurus. It's a good place for Venus. I think it'll be positive for a lot of people. So let's look at Venus as well. What's interesting about Venus, like I said, I kind of stressed this at the beginning. There's a lot going on with Venus. On the 25th, Venus is going to trine Saturn. And there's this interesting little thing that happens here. Basically, 3 aspects that are going to be happening this week. There's going to be more happening next week that we'll talk about that later. But we have Venus trining Saturn, which is a very strong aspect. It's good for, I think this is good for building instincts in yourself, building better instincts in regards to like finances even. So even if they're old financial fears and things like that, this is about building instincts. And it's also about checking into things before you jump into them as well, and learning that and having learned that in the past. So that's a very interesting kind of little transit there. We have Venus is going to square Pluto. And that might make you feel like you have no control over things. It's interesting. I'll say this because Venus trining Saturn's a little bit more positive. Venus squaring Pluto is a little bit more challenging, a little bit more of a challenging aspect. So it's like we have one good day, and then maybe the next day feels a little bit more challenging with this Venus square Pluto. And it's all about breaking rules, wanting to break rules, but not being able to, or, not having those things like breaking rules, but not having those rules that you're breaking kind of go your way. It's also a time to watch the lying, watch gossip. Don't do those things. Don't lie. Don't try to deceive people. Don't gossip, because it'll definitely come back to you at this time. But then we kind of end the week there with Venus conjuncting Uranus, and this is a good placement for love. It's a lot of very exciting things about love, and this could even be people starting to notice you, people starting to notice, I would say, especially if you've been putting work in as well, like if you've been working out, trying to improve yourself, or you've been on a diet, or even if you haven't, even if you just feel better, or you've been getting more rest and things like that, you'll find that people will kind of notice those things at this time. It's open for compliments and things like that. Also a good time to use your charm if you're charming. Very exciting time, and I think this makes us want more freedom as well. Again, we're coming off of Saturn, which is a little bit more serious, and now we are moving into this kind of like Uranian energy of wanting things to be more free, even maybe more socializing. A lot of you could be finding yourself socializing a lot more. So that's this week. Thank you for watching, and enjoy the week.